The road to Chapel Hollow twisted like a noose through the dense Virginia woods, the summer's heat clinging to every breath like wet gauze. Reverend Grier pulled his collar tighter, though the air was thick and still. Behind him, the dusty wheels of his carriage creaked under the weight of trunks and books he had brought south from Boston. Texts of scripture, law and reason. None of it, he believed, would prepare him for the Hollow. He'd been assigned to the Culpeper Circuit by the presbytery, sent to soothe a rural flock and tend a withering chapel. But he soon discovered the chapel wasn't the only thing long untended. The village of Darnell's Ford, nestled along the Rappahannock, lived in the shadow of a hill. None dared climb in a house. No one claimed to own the Sullivan estate. Children spoke of it in whispers, calling it the Crooked House, even though its frame stood perfectly straight. Their drawings showed a dark silhouette atop the hill, windows like watching eyes and smoke curling from a chimney long gone cold. When Grier asked about it at the general store, the shopkeeper, Mr. Ellery, simply said, "Best to mind your flock and let the hill sleep." But Grier could not let it rest. Not after the disappearances. The first child went missing in early May, a farm boy named Caleb, whose chores kept him near the edge of the woods. Then a girl vanished during a church picnic. 4 more followed in the span of 2 weeks, all under different circumstances but each within walking distance of Chapel Hollow. By July, the town was paralyzed. Men armed with hunting rifles combed the trees. Dogs caught no scent, no signs of struggle, no ransom notes. The sheriff, old and shaking from whiskey and age, blamed wolves. No one believed him. One sweltering afternoon, Grier sat in the tavern, hoping for names or leads when Widow Talbot leaned close, her breath sour with gin and memory, her hands speckled with liver spots, trembled as she laid a yellowed page of scripture on the table. She was the last to see inside, the widow said. Grier looked down, scrawled in faded ink beneath a verse from Leviticus were words not printed in any Bible he knew. He calls from the Hollow, and they go willingly. Let not the door be opened. The others in the tavern said nothing. Their silence was heavy, not ignorance but consent, as if they had all agreed long ago to pretend the house was not there. But Grier wasn't raised in silence. He had studied the language of devils and saints, the gospels of blood and fire. He had seen madness behind eyes that still smiled. Something about the Sullivan place felt unfinished. He first saw the house 2 days later, standing at the hilltop in the orange haze of twilight. Its brick walls were uncracked, its chimney intact, but its windows were blackened like sockets in a skull. Crows lined the roof, silent and watching, and in the soft dirt near the base of the hill, he found a child's shoe, small, mud-stained, the kind worn by orphans. The wind shifted, though no trees stirred, and somewhere far below the hill something groaned. It was then he knew the house had never been empty. The cellar door stood like a mouth cut into the floorboards, the iron key turning in Reverend Grier's hand with a reluctance that felt alive. Dust, undisturbed for decades, danced in the lantern light as the hinges screeched open. The air that escaped was old, not stale but ancient, as if the house had exhaled something buried beneath centuries of silence. The 5 of them stood in the entryway, lanterns trembling in their grips. Grier led the descent, his boots echoing against the stone steps. Behind him followed Martha Lane, pale but steady, clutching the locket of her missing niece. Elias Green, a former soldier turned blacksmith whose jaw clenched like iron. Ruth Leving, the town's midwife. And Thomas Bell, the sheriff's son, no more than 19 but insistent he would face whatever lay below. The staircase curved tighter the deeper they went, the walls narrowing, the air thickening with mildew and something sweet and rotting. The temperature dropped sharply. Grier felt it first in his fingertips, like dipping them into still icy water. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a vast chamber carved not of brick or wood, but ancient stone, smooth and black, as if melted and shaped by fire. Their lanterns barely touched the corners of the room. The shadows moved like they had weight. The air pulsed heavy with the hum of breath. Then they heard it, breathing. It came not from a single body but many, some shallow and rapid, others deep and slow. Inhuman in its rhythm, too many to count. The group froze. Grier raised his lantern and took a cautious step forward. The light fell on the first child. He was no older than 7, naked to the waist, his skin pale with filth, his eyes wide and empty. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, rusted iron fastened to a stone pillar behind him. A collar of blackened metal wrapped around his throat. He did not flinch at the light. He simply blinked once. More emerged as they stepped farther in. Children, dozens, 40 or more, maybe 50 packed into alcoves along the walls. Some sat, some crouched. A few stood upright, staring ahead at nothing, chained to stone with links etched in a script none of them recognized. Their limbs were thin, some trembling with cold or hunger, yet their faces bore no panic. No tears, only stillness. Martha fell to her knees, whispering her niece's name again and again. One of the children turned toward her ever so slightly, eyes flickering as if recalling something half-remembered from a dream. Grier approached a pillar. Symbols were carved into it, delicate interwoven lines forming a circular pattern. Not Latin, not Greek, older. Beneath the carvings, dark stains caked the floor, the kind he had seen once before at an exorcism outside Salem. Blood, dried in concentric rings. A low sound, like stone grinding on stone, issued from the wall. The chains tightened. A child coughed behind them, the sound wet and metallic. Thomas stepped back, heart racing, when his foot struck something. He turned and saw the remains of a doll, porcelain shattered, limbs scorched. Then they saw the murals. On every wall, etched in the same angular script, were images carved with impossible precision. The Sullivan family in procession, cloaked in black robes, each holding a child by the hand. The last image showed a great figure, horned and tall, with arms outstretched. At its feet the children knelt in silence. At its back the house itself loomed like a shrine. Elias Green, unshaken until then, whispered, "What in God's name is this?" A sound answered, a whisper but not made by lips. A rustle inside the stone. The children stirred for the first time. As one, their heads turned toward the newcomers, their eyes catching the lamplight with a dim, unnatural glint. They did not speak. They only watched. Then the light began to fail. One lantern after another dimmed, shadows crowding close like breath-fogging glass. The last lantern flickered in Grier's hand as a single, iron chain began to move, lifting, coiling, tightening like a serpent. And from the dark beyond the pillars a voice came, not loud, but felt inside the chest like a second heartbeat. "Now, they are seen." The fire from the shattered lantern spread with unnatural speed, racing in thin lines, along the grooves carved into the stone floor, grooves they now realized weren't cracks or imperfections, but part of a vast ancient sigil. The flames didn't burn high or fast, but glowed low and red like embers stoked by breath. The room seemed to inhale and exhale around them, pulsing in rhythm with the light. The children did not scream. They simply turned, dozens of them all at once, all toward the center of the chamber where Reverend Grier stood frozen, his mouth open, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. The golden shimmer had returned to their eyes, no longer dull but alive, glowing like coals buried under ash. They blinked in unison. Martha stumbled back from the pillar, her palms scorched from trying to pry open the manacle that bound the girl closest to her. The hammer she'd brought was bent, the head cracked. She coughed, smoke in her throat, and looked to the Reverend. He wasn't praying. He was whispering. Words not in Latin, not in English. Words no human should know. "Elias," she cried, turning to the blacksmith. But he was on his knees now, trembling, blood running from his ears, his hands pressed to the sides of his skull. His lips moved, but no sound came. Thomas had fled into the dark between the pillars, his lantern long lost. Ruth knelt among the children, rocking one of them slowly in her arms as if bewitched. And then above the hiss of fire and breath came the voice. It did not echo and it did not rise. It was simply there, inside them all, behind their ears, under their skin, speaking through their blood. "The pact was for 100 years, and you have brought the final offering." The walls groaned as if waking. Chains rattled along the stone like wind chimes touched by invisible hands. The very house groaned above them. Dust fell from the ceiling in waves. Something was shifting, either the earth or reality itself. Martha forced herself to stand, choking down her fear. She turned back to the girl she'd tried to free. The child was staring directly at her now, no longer blank but pleading. A tear, the first she'd seen on any of them, cut through the grime on her cheek. She raised the hammer again, though her hands trembled. The chain writhed as if aware, trying to pull away, to resist. As she brought the hammer down once more, a searing pain lanced through her skull like knives of sound, and her vision went white. Still she struck. Blood ran from her nose. The sigil underfoot flickered, breaking in one of the outer rings. The voice hissed, You would undo what was sworn? You would unmake what fed your peace? Grier turned to her now, but it was not Grier anymore. His face looked human, but his eyes had no whites. No pupils, just ink. His mouth opened too wide, his teeth too small, like a child imitating a man. His voice came out in many tones, high and low, male and female, old and newborn. She breaks the circle. She must be given. No, Martha screamed. You take nothing else. The children had begun to move now, slowly, like sleepwalkers rising from the floor. They did not attack. They simply turned inward, facing the voice. The girl nearest Martha reached up, touched her hand. He only takes what you give, the child whispered. Her voice cracked but audible. In that instant, Martha understood. The pact required offerings, willing or at least surrendered. The Sullivans had given their own. The town had fed the house with silence. The disappearances weren't thefts. They were gifts. Martha looked back at the Reverend, the thing in his skin. Then I give you nothing. She swung the hammer one final time. The chain shattered with a shriek, not of metal, but of something deeper, soul-deep. Light burst from the broken link, blinding, searing the symbols on the floor. One of the children screamed, a pure, human scream, and the rest joined in, their voices rising not in fear but in release. The stone cracked beneath their feet. The pillars trembled. The voice howled, fragmented, scattering like smoke torn by wind. And then, silence. When morning broke over Chapel Hollow, the Sullivan house was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, gone. In its place stood only blackened earth and a ring of scorched stone, still warm to the touch. 47 barefoot prints led from the center of the field into the surrounding woods. A week later, a girl was found wandering the road near Darnell's ford. Mute, sunken-eyed, her wrists bearing the faint shadows of shackles. She would never speak again, but she would draw. Always the same image. A tall, horned man standing beneath a crooked house, smiling, waiting.